Hello, good evening. Stuart, the unrepentant atheist. It's the evening in the UK. It's 11 o'clock or 2300 hours British summertime. So I guess that I will have some, hopefully, visitors from Europe and also in America, where obviously it's going to be, the morning, early afternoon, depending on where you are. So today, I'm not really going to be talking much about telephone calls on the line. My main topic for this live stream is actually why I personally believe there is no God, why I'm sort of moving closer to hard atheism all the time. So I'm going to talk about that fairly soon. But in the meantime, I just want to comment on a few other matters. Of course, we've got civil unrest in the UK at the moment. So, I mean, this is something that in the UK seems to come around about once every, I don't know, 5 or 10 years or so. My first memory of anything like this is back in 1981, when there was widespread civil unrest in the wake of Thatcher's economic reforms, high unemployment, etc. And I believe that there have been periods of civil unrest triggered by various things in the UK. And most lately, what we've had is a violent crime committed by a black person, offspring of refugees from Rwanda. This triggered civil unrest, mainly amongst, I think, right-wing racists who don't want to see any immigration whatsoever in the UK, particularly if people have got dark skin. So there have been hundreds of arrests, and I don't think that this is really representative of how people in Britain feel on the whole. There have been some counter demonstrations by citizens who are supporting integration of culture and acceptance of immigration. So I expect it will die down, but it's been obviously very unpleasant and slightly worrying. Okay, so moving on from there, and of course we've got the Olympics happening. There have been one or two, I don't know, issues with transgender athletes and that kind of thing, and obviously that was bound to happen because by Olympic rules, if you're transgender, you have the right to compete in your event by your new gender. So, but of course, a lot of people are unhappy, thinking that they've got an unfair advantage because maybe they've got higher testosterone levels, etc. But I mean, the only thing I can say to that is that elite female athletes, I mean, cis females, are absolutely phenomenal. And trans athletes have not really made inroads, have not really made much of an impact on international sport, because elite women athletes are absolutely just, unbelievably awesome. They obviously they're not as good as the men per event, but they are absolutely incredible. They really are. Okay, so yeah, so I mean, I don't really think we've seen much. We haven't really seen much success from transgender athletes anyway, in really any sports at all. And when there is some success, obviously there are people with certain opinions who will start claiming that it's unfair, etc. But okay, well, let's move on from there. Okay, so I want to read out an exchange that I had with somebody on my channel. It's only a very brief exchange. I made a video about Alan Watts, I don't know, a few weeks ago, where he's talking about this idea that, like an apple tree produces apples, You can say this apple tree is appling. That's what it does. It produces apples. And in the same way, the universe, which is conscious, uh, produces conscious entities. In other words, human beings. And it's like an analogy with the apple tree. This is the fruit of universal consciousness is human beings, and the idea that your consciousness is recycled, just like your body is recycled in nature. Your consciousness, and really nobody's ever been able to properly define consciousness, say what it is, where it is, or how it's produced. And yet there's this idea that there is this thing called consciousness, which is something more than just mere awareness. It's like a kind of, I don't know, pilot in the machine kind of thing, that when you die, your body is recycled through nature into the earth, into trees, into organic things. And your consciousness is recycled too, and it goes on to be a pilot in another machine. In other words, goes into another newborn child. So I think it's a lot of nonsense. I think it's as big a load of nonsense as Christianity, if not more. But there are people around who believe this, and I don't know what benefit they get from believing it, because at least in Christianity, you've got benefits, haven't you? You've got the possibility, well, you've got the belief that you've got life after death, which gives you comfort if you can really convince yourself to believe it. You've got Jesus as your savior, making you feel good, being your personal buddy that walks next to you every single day and watches over you. You've got the Lord God, who you can pray to and who intervenes in the world. So at least with Christianity, you've got there's some reason to believe in it. I mean, as William Lane Craig said, if something is so good, I mean, this is madness, but he said, if something is so good and so attractive, then you lower the bar for epistemic standards. So with Christianity, because it's so attractive, you want to believe it, so you lower your standards, your threshold, so that in order to get over the bar of belief, you can just hop over it. You don't need to do a Fosbury flop and do a 15 or 20 meter run up and risk crashing through the bar. No, you can just hop over it like a little child. So okay, I get that with Christianity and why there are so many Christians, because to them it's such an attractive belief system that it's almost worth believing it, even if really you've got doubts about the truth of it. But with this crazy idea that the universe is consciousness, or conscious, everything is oneness, and the body and the consciousness is all recycled. So in a way, it's like, if we can say consciousness is like the soul or something like that, it effectively means that, I suppose it would mean that you would be immortal, or your consciousness, this pilot in the machine, is just going to go on and on. It's going to be recycled ad infinitum. Well, I suppose that's a kind of attractive belief. It's a kind of attractive belief because you could see how, when you die, the lights don't go out forever. That if it's true that this pilot in the machine, or this consciousness, is recycled into another body, into another child being born, then sooner or later, it's going to look through the eyes of that child into the world and experience and be again. So the lights won't go out forever. You won't have any of your memories. You won't take any of your memories with you. You'll remember nothing of your previous life. But yet it will be like an afterlife, or rather a continuation of life. So yeah, I suppose in that sense, it could be a kind of placebo-like comforting mechanism for the thought that death is the final end, in the same way that Christianity is a comforting mechanism too, with the idea that you can get salvation and live in heaven for the rest of your life. Let me just read this brief exchange, okay? We've got two people in chat, Daniel Hello, Daniel. Gogaruga says, could consciousness be comprised of dark matter? Well, I mean, that's almost like saying, well, we've done the double slit experiment, and you can have something that's a particle and a wave at the same time. Quantum mechanics proves it, and therefore we can sort of believe in consciousness because dark matter's got this mysterious ring to it. So is consciousness, and if you somehow conflate the two, one kind of corroborates the other in some kind of illogical, irrational, wishful thinking kind of way. But no, I don't know whether consciousness could be dark matter or not. I've got absolutely no idea. So let me just read out this transcript. I've printed it out here from my channel. So yeah, so it's on the video I did on Alan Watts, where I provided some commentary, and I kind of ridiculed a bit what Alan Watts was saying, that really he's got no evidence to back any of this up, and it's all just wishful thinking. Woo-woo nonsense is what we atheists tend to label it as. So, okay, this is what the viewer wrote and left a comment on my channel, which I could have left. I could have ignored it and just left it alone, but because I like engaging now and again, I did decide to reply. So he says, there's no continuous individual, there's a process. Yeah, okay, well, I get that. So this consciousness inside you, it journeys on, but it doesn't take your memory with you. It doesn't take the memory. Everything that makes you, tied to this earth, stays behind, rots into the ground, and is gone. But this process continues. Consciousness will be reborn into another body. Okay, so yeah, there's a process. You are one with it. Well, I mean, this is getting into sort of esoteric language. People say, New Age mystics say, "Oh, we're all one with the universe," and really, it doesn't. I mean, it's. I suppose it's what the logical positives would say is literally meaningless. Yeah, you are one with it. It sounds groovy, doesn't it? If you're sitting in a smoke-filled room with a bunch of hippie like New Agers with incense sticks burning, and vegan curry and rice sitting in front of them, they'll start talking about this kind of thing and say, "Oh yes, we're all one with it. The soul or the consciousness journeys on." So he goes on to say, "Consciousness is all there is." Okay, all right. Well, if consciousness is all there is, then it means that this pencil is also this pencil that must then be consciousness. If consciousness is all there is, then everything's consciousness. How does that make any sense? No, consciousness is not. First of all, nobody's ever been able to isolate consciousness and demonstrate it and show it. All we've been able to see are brainwave states, nothing really much more than that. So, okay, consciousness is all there is. Matter and energy are both ideas within the fields of consciousness. Well, that doesn't really make much sense, does it? I mean, okay, matter and energy are both ideas. Okay, so yeah, I understand what he's saying. He's saying that everything's a construct. All the matter around us is a construct of the mind. Yeah, I mean, I've heard this. Well, demonstrate it. I don't seriously think that this is the case. I mean, to what extent is that? That would have to mean then that I'm also a construct of consciousness. So yeah, if you've got this idea that there's this force, consciousness, which manifests itself with the matter which we've got in the expanding universe, and all the inorganic and organic matter in it, and obviously organic life forms. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so if you say that consciousness, everything manifests from consciousness, then yeah, I can see that, but prove it. I understand the theory of it, but demonstrate that it's true. I don't think there's any good reason to believe it. All right, Stephen Daniel is left a comment. Yes, that is indeed a mystical belief. We live on forever. we will have our memories. Well, well, that's the Christian belief. I would think that Christian belief is that when you go to heaven, you take your memories with you. But according to neuroscience, memory is something that resides in the brain, and when the brain is destroyed, the memory will obviously be destroyed with it. So I think that these New Age mystics are saying something different. That consciousness journeys on without the memories; it leaves that behind, and it finds a new host. So, okay, then he goes on to say atheism is baseless. Well, in what sense is atheism baseless? I mean, look, the basis of my atheism is that I don't think that the claims for the existence of God have met sufficient burden of proof. So I'm not convinced that there is a God for that reason. I mean, in what way is that a baseless position? I think probably uh, a lot of um, a lot of theists and a lot of New Age sort of mystic believers have got this idea that atheism isn't just a rejection of God claims, but it's also the wholesale rejection of the supernatural and anything which is beyond the material world, which obviously just isn't the case. I mean, that happens to be my world. That happens to be my worldview as a person, but my atheism really just relates to the well, the non-existence of God, really. Um, okay, well, welcome to those who are in chat. Thank you for joining us. You're welcome to sort of chat with each other or listen to me, or you can put questions out there to me or to somebody else in chat. I'm not too sure how long this live stream is going to go on. The last one was an hour, mainly because I ran out of power on my laptop. Well, I'm plugged in now, so it could go on for a while. I'll just keep going until until my vocal cords give out, probably, which is usually around about the 1.5 hour mark. Okay, so well, Daniel, I'm gonna talk about that. If I make a claim that God doesn't exist, I'm going to talk about whether that would be a valid claim to make, whether it would be a baseless claim. I don't happen to think it's a baseless claim. I think that claiming that there is no God actually has got quite a good basis to it. So we'll talk about that shortly. Let me just go on then with what this person says. So he says, so atheism is baseless. Then he goes to the first law of thermodynamics. Matter or energy can't be created or destroyed. Okay. Nature recycles everything. Yeah. Okay. Well, it recycles. It recycles everything. It recycles all matter, doesn't it? All matter is recycled. So I'm not aware that anything besides matter is actually recycled. Energy moves from one state to another. Yeah, I get that. But what I don't agree with is he says, I agree that nature recycles everything. And then he says, including consciousness. That's the bit that I don't agree with. Yeah. Then he says, you are all of them, but you can only experience it one at a time. That's how it is. You are all of them. I'm not really too sure what he means by that. Yeah, I think he's talking about all the people that have got consciousness. We're all kind of connected to this source of it all, which is this so-called consciousness out of which everything comes, including the material world. Okay. All right, so how did I reply? Okay, well, I took exception with his comment that atheism is baseless. And I replied, is there any God? Now, look, you're probably wondering, why did I ask that question? Is there any God? Because, as far as I'm aware, people who believe in this kind of thing don't believe in any God. And if he'd come back, he's saying atheism is baseless. And I asked the question, is there any God? It's because I want to draw him out to say, no, there's no God. Now, look, I've spent time, I've been to India. I've done the whole trip myself into all this stuff, and I've sat in rooms with people who said, "Yeah, there's no God. There's no God, but there is this. There is consciousness." And um, so I wanted this person to say, "Yeah, there's no God, but this is the way things work. There is just consciousness, right?" So I said, "Is there any God?" And this was the reply: "God is good. Evil is the devil. Etymologically speaking, is there any good within you or not?" What a dodge. What a dodge of the question, eh? I mean, look, okay, I'll tell you how I replied. If your definition of God is just that it is good and nothing more, then for that God, I believe in it. Yeah, because obviously I believe that, I mean, good is like a sort of, abstract thing. If we're talking about Platonic good, it would be like one of the forms. Goodness would be one of the forms, or the good will be one of the forms in this ideal world that Plato speculated about, right? So, in the sense that, we could call this um, ideal good God, then okay. I mean, if we talk about, the prototype of what good is, well, I mean, that would take some time to define what actually good is. What do we mean by good? But okay, I mean, for the sake of argument, I'm accepting his premise that there is good and that we've all got good in us. I would say what that means, we've all got good in us. It means we've got the potential to do constructive, beneficial things for other people, which truly benefit them and their well-being. So yeah, I believe that most people have probably got that in them. So if that's what he's saying is God, then yeah, I mean, I'm on board with that. And if he's saying it's like, I mean, I could say, okay, I'm going to call this pencil God. Am I still an atheist? Okay, well, let's say this pencil is God. Well, then no, I suppose I'm not an atheist anymore. But I only believe in this God because I've defined it as God. I don't believe in any other God. It's pretty much meaningless. Okay, I'll go on and finish off what I was saying to him. Yeah, so for that God, I believe in it. If he's just saying that he's just putting a different label or a synonym on what we call good. Okay, but I do not believe the claim that nature recycles consciousness. No, of course not. I don't believe that. I don't believe that claim. That's the whole essence of, I suppose, the entire religion of sort of New Age mysticism. This idea that you journey on, and so many people believe it. They really believe in it. It's just, I suppose, it's a kind of Christianity in that sense because it promises some kind of life after death. So then I go on to say, people die and others are born, but only the actual physical body is recycled through nature as far as we know. So yeah, I've added that. I always tend to add, as far as we know, because I'm leaving open that there could be some other possibility. I'm leaving open that this could be true. Yeah, it's good. It's a good kind of thing to do that. But as far as we know, only the physical body is recycled, of course. Atheism is just a position of not believing in any god or gods, actual personal entity gods, typically the god of classical theism. Because look, when I call myself an atheist, I'm really talking about myself as an atheist in respect of the the god of classical theism, the monotheism god of Islam and of Christianity and of Judaism. I'm talking about the God which you can pray to, which supposedly created everything, which is interfering in the world or intervening in the world, and which passes judgment on you when you die and decides what's going to happen to you in the afterlife. That's the God I'm interested in. These other gods, these pencil gods, these everything is consciousness and everything is a construct of consciousness. That type of God is of real no interest to me, because it's not something which it's not really something which is ever it's not something which can impact on my life, and whether I believe in it or not is not really a problem. And as for the people that do believe this stuff, I suppose it makes them feel groovy, and it gives them a bit of a warm, fuzzy feeling to think that they're one with the universe. But I mean, apart from that, it's a pretty much useless definition of God. So yeah, it's mainly my atheism relates to, well, of course, it relates to all gods, but and of course, I don't accept good as as a god. That's just crazy. I mean, goodness, the abstract good, is not a god. The feeling that I've got in me that I want to do good to people, that's not a god. I mean, look, it's not a god, but he's defining it as a god because he knows where I'm going. He knows where I'm going in terms of his comment when he says atheism is baseless. Because if he'd said, well, no, there is no God, but there is this consciousness, I'd say, well, then you're an atheist too. And he knew I was going there. And then he come up with this nonsense that, well, God is just good. Do you have goodness in you? Well, I mean, even if I've got no goodness in me, let's say that God is goodness. Even if I've got no goodness in me, that doesn't mean that God, by that definition, doesn't exist. Because I mean, Hitler didn't have Hitler didn't have any goodness in him. Stalin probably didn't have any goodness in him. Pol Pot, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that goodness doesn't exist. So this is a typical kind of poor reasoning. And I've had no reply. I left my reply several days ago, and there's been no reply since. So I find sort of New Age mysticism as uh, sort of preposterous and empty as Christianity in that sense. In fact, in many ways, I find it worse than Christianity, because I think a lot of people who were Christians, and in the wake of various scientific advances, theory of evolution, um, geology tells us the age of the Earth, it's not 4,000, it's 6,000 years old. And because we've had these advances in the 20th century, a lot of Christians were looking to find something that was a bit more up to date, but kind of connected to the past. And you've got this New Age mysticism, which is rooted in, I suppose, what shall we say, Buddhism, Zen, and sort of elements of Hinduism. It's rooted in sort of Eastern religion, and it's got an appeal for people who found Christianity unpalatable, unscientific. And all they've done, really, in my view, is they've just jumped from one unproven religion to another. But I suppose that, like Christians, they've got their community, and I've been in the community of these people. They mean well, they're nice people, and well, I wouldn't say they're all nice people. I mean, some of them were really on a big kind of ego trip, to prove that they were the best meditators, and they understood Buddha like nobody else could, and they were going to be the next guru. So yeah, I mean, actually, to be honest with you, having mixed with Christians recently, I'd probably rather just mix with Christians, because when I've mixed with Christians, they've not really talked about their religion. But when I've mixed with New Age mystics, they are so full of it. They are so full of being one with the existence and journeying on, going right to the core of your being, etc., etc., that it used to drive me crazy. So they're even more fanatical than Christians that I've met. And I was one of them for some time, until I suppose I probably saw the ridiculousness of it. and got out of it. But that's not to say that meditation is not a good thing. And I think that meditation is a good thing. If you can find 20 minutes a day, to sit, close your eyes in a quiet room and just breathe, and just breathe, rhythmically without trying, and just meditate. Don't fight the thoughts. Don't try to silence your mind. And yeah, I'm all for that. I'm absolutely all for that. It's if you can kind of master the art of doing nothing and relaxation through meditation, it's really beneficial. But that doesn't mean to say that you have to take on board all the baggage. So okay. So anyway, that was that. So yeah, before I move on to talking about atheism and why I think there's no God, just say a few words about The Line. Look, I've watched The Line. I haven't been making many videos recently, partly because I've been busy with various things, and I kind of hit a bit of a writer's block with doing some of these videos, where I sort of got fed up doing. I got fed up doing the map videos, and for 2 weeks I've hardly made a video. I've actually made one today, which I'm going to upload tomorrow. So I would like to do one or two a week, and then do different type of material. Otherwise, my channel is just going to die if I don't put some work in. And I've started it, so I might as well keep going with it. Yeah. So let me see. Oh yes. So I did listen to one or two calls on The Line, and the call today that I reacted on and commented on was Ty's call, which I listened to today and went out last night. I'm just having a look at some of your comments. Just give me a moment while I just sort of get my voice back. Okay, it looks like some conversations are going on in chat, which is good. Daniel says, I believe science is not at odds with the biblical teachings. And Stephen Jackson says science and the Bible are mostly incompatible. Okay. Medication is great, says XE Music. I think you probably mean meditation. That's one thing with Christianity. Prayer, I suppose that when you're praying, if you could truly subordinate yourself and believe that there's a God up there to subordinate yourself to and make yourself humble and kind of let go of your ego, then I could see how that might bring you something. Yeah. So, but in terms of just praying without doing that, I don't really see how I see it as inferior to the Buddhist practice of meditation. Whereas meditation is demonstrably useful and good for well-being, I think mostly prayer is probably not, unless you could truly, surrender to this. I heard a mystic talking once about the whole idea of, religion and everything, and he said that, in order to get somewhere spiritually, you've got to surrender to something, even if it's a stone. This was really an admission to me that it's all placebo. If you can get to that kind of state, kind of egoless state, by surrendering to a stone or an imaginary idea of a god, then it's just placebo. But I certainly get the fact that if you can feel yourself, I don't know, kind of small or subordinated to something which is much bigger than you, I could see how it might give you something. That's not something which I feel that I could do, because I don't believe there's any God up there to do that too. and I'm not prepared to surrender to a stone. So there you are. I'm stuck with my pumped up ego, and that's all there is to it. Unless somebody can convince me that Jesus really exists, I suppose that's the way I'm going to be. Okay, yeah. So the calls, yeah, there was Ty's call, which he called in to say that healing miracles prove that his religion is true. Yeah. So he's had some kind of, I don't know, healing experiences, or people that he knows have been healed when really they should have died. And this proves his specific religion being Christianity. And both Matt and Aaron did ask him some very good, was it Aaron? No, sorry, it was Jimmy. Jimmy was on today. They asked him some quite good questions. How can you determine that? What are your criteria? And Jimmy asked a good question. He said, well, look, or Matt, I can't remember, Matt or Jimmy. He said, if you've got 20 people with terminal illnesses and there are 3 other people out there from different religions, let's say Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and each one of those 3 is praying one at a time for each one of the 20, and that a certain number of them go into remission. How do you determine which of the 3 religions helped? Which of the gods of the 3 religions actually intervene by divine intervention and save those people? How can you determine that? And his answer was, that, I've heard this answer before. He said, well, it doesn't really matter that you've got 3 different religions because the source is the same. So in other words, when we see Muslims praying for a Muslim with cancer and the Muslim gets better, that miracle is coming from the same source as Christians praying for, a Christian who has also got terminal cancer. So it's all coming from the same source. In other words, the problem with that is, if he's saying that there are different religions, but there's just one source. There's just one God. He's saying effectively that Muslims are within their rights to claim that Allah is the true God, and that Christians are right to claim that Yahweh is the true God, or Jesus. And no, sorry, it's Jews, and the Jews would claim that Yahweh or Jehovah is the true God, and that this is all coming from the same source. If you have this belief that it's all coming from the same source, then if that same source instituted salvation through Jesus, set up Islam, in which Jesus is just a prophet, and also set up Judaism, in which Jesus is considered to be a non-entity, or just I don't know, I'm not too sure what the Jews consider Jesus to be, just a prophet or even a false prophet. That doesn't really work, does it? Because all the 3 major religions disagree with each other on so many fundamental things. So him saying that it all comes from the same source, well, I suppose it might well be the case, and maybe I'll talk about this later, about why I don't think there's a God. It may be the case that, let's say there's one God, and that it was appropriate for the Jews and for those living in the, most of them living in the ancient world, to adopt Christianity because it was right for them. The Christian package was right for those people, in the same way that the Mohammedan package with Islam was right for the Arab peoples. And there's no contradiction. Yeah, okay. So the Jews and the Greeks and everybody and the Corinthians and what have you and the Romans they're fit for Christianity. That will fit there, but that won't fit with the Muslims. Sorry, with the Arabs. So we'll need another religion for them. Let's not have Jesus. Let's say that Jesus is just a prophet, but keep it within the Abrahamic umbrella of monotheism. And that God says, okay, so we're going to have Islam there, and we're going to keep Judaism, and we're going to have them reject Jesus because the Jews are kind of special, and I want to keep them like that. I don't want them sort of. Christianity will be good for the world at large because I need to promote this idea that you've got to love your neighbor, and we don't want too many wars. And I mean, why not? I mean, why not? Maybe, yeah. I mean, in that sense, maybe there is just one source, and so yeah, okay, if you're born into Christianity and you adopt Christianity, or if you're born into that culture and you reject Jesus, you really are. There's a heaven and a hell specifically for Christians and for those who rejected Jesus in Christian cultures. But that's a different place from where Muslims will go. There's another dimension for them, which is populated for the men at least by dark-eyed virgins, um, feeding men grapes and fruit, etc., and making themselves available to them. So yeah, that's for it. That's for the Arab people, and the Jews. Well, they'll never come up to date. So let them dress exactly the same as they did 2,500 years ago, and you can still see them in New York, in the Jewish Quarter, and even in London, dressing in exactly the same way as they did 2,500 years ago. Okay, enough of that. So yeah, Ty's call. He sort of fudged his way through it, and he couldn't really provide a methodology. He did say, well, the Roman Catholic Church has got 3 criteria for determining that something's a miracle. And I think Matt kind of misread that and said, well, they're the criteria for determining that it's a miracle of the Christian God. No, I think that as far as I know, the criteria for determining if something is a miracle, the 3 criteria, the Roman Catholic Church sends somebody out, they investigate, and they find out, for example, if somebody's healed, was there any medical intervention in that? And if so, what were the circumstances? Can we reasonably say that the medical intervention wasn't what did the curing of it, but that, it must be something else? They've got their own criteria to determine whether they think it was a miracle or not. But, whatever they determine it is, doesn't mean it is a real miracle. And let's supposing it was a real miracle, their criteria won't tell them whether it came from the Christian God. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick break and have a look at your comments. Okay, it looks like, okay. Coming from Mormonism, says Stephen Jackson, I can tell you religions are not all compatible with each other. Well, that's true, and not only that, but there are factions within Christianity which are not compatible with each other. I know Christians who broke away from the main church here because they reject gays, they reject women ministers, and they're very fundamental, and they don't get on at all with the mainstream Christians. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you're having a good chat in chat. Good. Which means you're probably not listening to me, but it doesn't matter. Okay, let me just see. Oh yeah, this was quite funny. The last call, I think it was on the line on the hang up yesterday, was that a woman called in to ask for advice from Jimmy on how to start an atheist YouTube channel. Oh, excuse me, it's getting late here. It's 11:45. Excuse me. I'll keep going now. So a woman wants to start her own atheist YouTube channel, and I think they both Matt and Jimmy said to her, "If you want our advice, don't." That's kind of funny advice, isn't it? Given that Jimmy's got quite a successful channel there, and Matt's done well out of it. So, but yeah, I know what they mean. That no, in fact, Matt made a good point. He said that only do it if the subject really interests you. And as he said, he would make videos even if nobody looked at them. Well, I'm not really too sure if that's true. I mean, I've got some other YouTube channels which I've made over the years and which were flops, to be honest with you, or they didn't really get much traffic. And I mean, I was interested in, there are certain subjects I'm interested in, but no, you need an audience. I mean, look, it's like, would you want to be an actor or a singer if your only option was to go and sing to an empty theater? You wouldn't really want to do it, would you? You'd be singing for yourself. So I don't really think that Matt would want to do this if he had absolutely zero audience. And frankly, I wouldn't do it either. If my viewing figures dropped to, I don't know, if all my future videos got less than, say, 100 views without exception, I'd probably throw in the towel, because I like to think that I'm kind of on a very slight upward curve. If I knew that I was going down like that, then I'd probably throw in the towel. So, but no, I'll keep going for now anyway. Okay. By the way, just one very quick anecdote I'll tell you about that, because when Matt said he would do it even if there's nobody listening, I heard a tale. It's probably true. I heard a tale about the great violinist Jascha Heifetz, which I'm sure a lot of you probably would have heard of. And he played to packed houses everywhere. He was the most famous violinist in the world. And the story is that he was doing a tour, and he went to one town where they hadn't put posters up for his concert. And when he got there and he got to the stage, there was only one man. There was only one person in the audience. And this man in the audience, so the story goes, said to Heifetz, "Look, I'm sorry that nobody else has turned out to hear you play, maestro. Don't feel obligated to play just for me, because I'm the only person that bought a ticket. I don't expect you to play a concert just for me. Let me take you to a restaurant. It'd be an honor for me to talk to you." And Heifetz said, I'm a professional violinist. It's my job to pay. I've been booked here to play, and you're my audience. And the story is that he played. He not only played, but he then later wrote that was he considered that to be his best performance. So I can accept that somebody could be so passionate and serious about what they're doing that they would be prepared to make videos even if nobody looked at them. But I'm just not one of those people. I like to have a bit of an audience. And just one other anecdote, a personal one. I don't want too many people turning off, but just one other quick anecdote here. Just one other quick anecdote. Okay, I'm not a singer, right? I'm not a singer, but quite recently I've been going to there's some folk singing gatherings here where I live. Yeah, they're where people go along and they stand up and sing a song. I mean, we all know a folk song, at least one folk song, even if it's just Greensleeves or something like that, or Scarborough Fair. And so, yeah, I went along, and somebody said to me, "Oh, can you sing anything?" And I said, "Well," I said, "I know a couple of songs, but I'd need time to prepare them." I don't know why I said that. I must have been absolutely crazy. So as a result of that, I prepared a song. I learned a couple of folk songs about 30 years ago. I had a few singing lessons, but I considered myself to be not talented, and I didn't even bother to perform. I regretted making that promise I actually regretted making that promise to sing in front of an audience, and I was getting more nervous by the day, and I was practicing a lot. I was practicing a heck of a lot. Um, Now, somebody told me that the concert was going to be cancelled because for some reason, and I sort of breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, thank goodness! No, people are not going to have to listen to my awful singing voice. And but then it got put back on, and suddenly I was thinking, oh my God, it's going to happen after all. So I went along, and for this kind of thing, really, when you're nervous, it's best to be the first, not the last. But I sort of waited one, two, three, four, five, six. I was about the eighth person eventually. And anyway, I sang my song. Everything went fine. I didn't forget the words. I managed to stay in tune, and everything was fine. I'm glad I did it, but I won't be doing it again. No, I'm not a singer. I'm a better YouTube. I'm a better YouTube atheist than a singer. That's for sure. But yeah, to be honest with you, standing up in front of people and singing, I mean, there was about maybe 60 odd people in the audience. Um, yeah, it's quite nerve wracking, actually. I didn't have any accompaniment, it was just me. So, no, I'm not going to sing the song on here. No way. Okay, let me just look at your comments. Stuart, the key is to keep putting streams out there and people will tune in more and more. Yeah, maybe. Oh, I see. Lee Jam. Sure. I've heard two other celebrities tell that story about them. One was a comedian who said he took the guy out to dinner and did his routine. Oh, I see. That might well be a generic tale that's going around. Yeah, because in the tale that I heard, um, I can't remember whether it was Heifetz that took him out for dinner or at the end, the man then took him out for dinner. But yeah, it's a nice story. Look, it's a nice story, even if it's not true. Okay, so let me see. I'm just going to. What else happened on the line? There were so many calls. Matt did get really angry on one or two of those calls. Not so much last night, but on the Sunday show there were one or two where he was really getting angry. So yeah, Aaron mentioned something quite interesting, I thought, about arguments for the existence of God, which can befuddle an atheist. You like, let's say a modal logic argument, which they can be quite complicated. Some of these arguments, when you get into them, they can look quite complex. And as an atheist, especially if you're not too much into philosophy, they can kind of befuddle you, like, oh, what's going on there? I can't quite see, I can't quite get the chain of logic there, and I don't understand why that should be so. And then a Christian who is well versed in philosophy will say, how can you call yourself a critical thinker? How can you call yourself a skeptic? And how can you possibly be an atheist if you can't even understand this modal logic argument? You've got no basis for your atheism whatsoever. You're flailing around. You can't understand the philosophy. Frankly, go out and get some education before you decide there isn't a God, or beside you decide that there isn't a God. So, I mean, by that argument, it would mean that if you put forward a complex argument for the existence of God in front of, shall we say, 1,000 atheists, and only 30 of them could unravel it and identify where the weaknesses are, does that mean that the other 970 haven't got good grounds for rejecting belief in God? No, I don't think so. And no matter how much you can befuddle somebody by an argument, it doesn't validate your claim. That's the thing about it. If you claim that God exists and then you present an argument which nobody can understand or people can't understand, it doesn't mean that your claim is true. It just means the person didn't understand the argument. And even though they didn't understand it, there are other people who can understand it. And you've got to take your argument to the people who can understand it and have it checked out, which is what's happening all the time. What's happening in the world of philosophy in the universities? They're analyzing these arguments for the existence of God all the time. And if there was a sound argument where the premises were true and demonstrated to be true, and the existence of God were proven by philosophical argument, and nobody could touch it. It's a bit like Fermat's last theorem. There was a British mathematician who thought he'd solved it. He spent years, he thought he'd solved it. And his solution was pulled apart, right? His solution was pulled apart. And he had to go out there and do it again. And he did it again. And, this time it seems to be watertight. It seems to be sound, and indeed it is sound, because more or less the world of mathematics has said, yes, you have solved Fermat's last theorem. There's a consensus on it, in the same way that if there was a philosophical argument that was so powerful and strong and demonstrably true, we would all know about it. Somebody would win the Nobel Prize in, what would it be? Well, they would certainly be famous, and we would all know about it if the existence of God had been proven by philosophical argument. So there's no need, if you're befuddled by philosophical argument, you can still be justified in disbelieving in the existence of God, because your befuddlement does not validate anybody's claim. So yeah, I've often had Christians do this. They'll copy and paste, I don't know. There's a website devoted to theism with all the philosophical arguments fully fleshed out, and you could just go to that website. I forget what it's called, and you could and people do this. They come onto my channel and they paste a philosophical argument for the existence of God. They paste it from somewhere, and I can Google that and find out where they've got it from, and then they'll say, checkmate atheists, and they'll just go away laughing. And and then there are usually replies pointing out, well, that's debatable, etc., etc. This is the thing. These philosophical arguments have already been debated to death, and they're still being debated and argued and picked through in the world's universities by the world's great philosophers. And so far, the way it goes, it seems, is that those who are already theists accept those arguments, and those who are atheists don't accept them. So there's no consensus. We'll have to wait for a valid and sound, foolproof proof for the existence of God, philosophical argument, and we haven't got it so far. So don't waste my time on my channel coming to me with a contingency argument. And no, don't waste your time with philosophical arguments, because why come to me? Why not take your philosophical argument to professional philosophers, not existing theists, because they'll just say, oh yeah, that's right, cosmological argument, good proof there for the existence of God. Or, oh yeah, the contingency argument, that version of the contingency argument, yep, good one, God exists. Yep, I think so too. And atheist philosophers will say, well, no, because that premise is not, we need to talk about that, and that's not proven. So, okay, so yeah, so that's philosophy for you, and I don't find a philosophical route to belief in God really to be realistic and viable, because I don't really think there are many people out there who believe in God because they heard a convincing philosophical argument. I think people who already believe in God and are looking to validate by some means their belief latch on to some of these arguments and use them as a sort of ammunition for when they need them, when they come across an atheist, if they're well prepared anyway. Look, somebody like Cliff Knechtly, and I've done a video on him. He was out there on a student campus. I've got to hand it to him. He knows how to put his stuff across. He knows how to put it in such a way, in such a confident way, that it would take a very bold student to challenge him. That video I made, he said so many, I mean, he said atheism is wrong. Almost like his chain of logic is atheism is wrong, and that validates Christianity. And um, something can't come from nothing, can it? And he will go to a student and say, "You show me an example where something can come from nothing. Where do you think all this came from? You think it just magically appeared from nothing, do you?" He uses these arguments, and these students are, I mean, I'm sure some of them must be bright, but none of them really challenged him at all. And they just stood there with open mouths, looking terrified. I wonder how many of them went away and thought, maybe he's right. I better join the local Students' Christian Union. Well, actually, why not? Why not join the local Students' Christian Union? It's a good, it's as good a social place. It's a good, probably for a young man at university, it's as good a place as any, to find female company. Yeah, so why not? But I mean, not for actually believing in the God, and not for any other reason, but maybe just socializing. Okay, so yeah, that was what Aaron said. Yeah, that he made a good point there. His own befuddlement does not validate, does not mean that there is actually a God. There was some disagreement with, I've noticed that with when Aaron and Matt are on, there are disagreements. Aaron will talk and Matt will say, well, I disagree with most of that. I think that's actually very good. I think that's good. They're having some sort of fairly good natured disagreements. And Aaron, he's not such a bad he kind of he just sort of shrugs his shoulders. He doesn't really seem to take it personally, and he doesn't really it doesn't really seem to faze him too much when Matt disagrees with him. He just said, well, I'd like to hear your reasons for disagreeing with me. And they seem to be able to disagree on quite friendly terms. I've noticed, Matt and Aaron, which I think is quite a good thing. And his point was, which actually, yeah, I've got to agree with Matt on this one. His point in terms of morality is that there's universal agreement on general moral principles. I think that's a very difficult one to. I would tend to shy away from making that kind of statement. I know what he means. That it seems that across societies, we don't steal, we don't kill, we don't lie. We sort of recognize these as fundamental, properly basic moral principles that almost don't need any further justification to accept as truly moral. And Matt said, well, what about, I can tell you one thing, what about abortion? There's no proper consensus on, whether abortion is a moral thing or not. So, yeah, I mean, he found one thing there, which I suppose is the case. I mean, there are other things like there's no consensus on the age of consent, sexual consent. In Britain, the age is 16. I believe in some other countries it's lower than that, it's 14. There are cultures where it's even lower than that. And I think there are some cultures where there's no lower limit on the age of consent. So, there's there are some there's no universal consensus on every single point. There's probably universal consensus on a small number of moral principles, I suppose. Let me just have a look at your comments. Just a moment. How long have I been going? When did I start? 11. Been going an hour. Okay. Okay. Let me move on then. Yeah, there was that amazing story by that lady who phoned in. She said that her father was a cook in the Vatican. He cooked meals for all the priests and everything. And she said that all of her family had died in the last few years, either of COVID or cancer. I mean, actually, I can't remember what that call was about, but I just jotted that down because I don't know why I wrote that down. I just thought it was quite, well, I mean, incredibly bad luck, I suppose. Okay. Um, yeah, but sorry, I didn't really finish what I wanted to say about the woman who wanted to start a YouTube channel, because I think Jimmy recommended that she collaborates with somebody. That could be a good thing. That could be a good thing to sort of get you off the ground a bit, because when you first start a channel, the things move very slowly at first, unless you're really lucky and you really catch on quickly, which can happen. It's usually a bit of a grind. I mean, for most of us out there, for most of us, I'd say for 99 out of 100 channels that start, it's quite a slow grind to get viewers coming in and to get subscriptions moving. And then 1% get things going fairly quickly. And of those, 1% of those sort of become quite, significant channels. So it's very, very difficult to get going. I mean, in my case, look, I used to be a fan of The Amazing Atheist long time ago. I suppose that he was the first atheist that I listened to on YouTube. Although he never really talked about atheism, he talked about current affairs, things that were going on um, in American society, and he had a way of talking about these things in a very charismatic kind of way. And I liked the way he used language, and I don't know, there was just something about him which um, was very interesting to listen to, the way that he told and put across his point of view, the way that he satirized things. And he got going, I believe, very quickly. He, I don't know, he's got probably over 1 million subscribers or something like that. So I watched him for about a year, and then he kind of tailed off. I stopped watching him, and I went back and I looked recently, and I saw that his channel's kind of gone downhill a bit. He doesn't get as many viewers as he used to. And he looked to me like he kind of degenerated a bit as a person. It looked to me like, when I was watching him talk in a video about 6 months ago, I mean, he was actually rocking backwards and forwards like this. You've got to be careful with YouTube, with doing stuff online, and because you could end up just sitting in a darkened room for the whole day, vegetating. And I got the impression that he hadn't really done a lot with his life except, just made videos. And I don't know socially what he's doing, whether he's got friends or anything, but he looked to me a bit, I mean, he looked very charismatic and interesting at first. And then, but when I watched his later videos, it looks like he sort of burnt himself out a bit. So he's The Amazing Atheist. And yeah, so what I'm saying is that, and it's not always the case, but it helps if you've got a big personality, you've got a lot of charisma, then people will respond to that. You've got a good chance of building a channel. But having said that, I know of people who are quite laid back. I know of channels that are quite laid back and have been really successful. So that's not always the case. So yeah. So yeah, it's a really tough job in terms of collaboration. Yeah, that would be if she could get on board with some maybe YouTubers. I mean, even like myself, if she came to me, I mean, to be honest with you, if she came to me, I wouldn't really be that interested, because she'd be coming to me with a position of having virtually 0 subscribers. And, I've taken a while to get to just 3,500 subscribers. I'd probably want to collaborate with somebody who kind of is the same level as me and not a newbie just starting out. But I don't know, I might change my mind. I suppose it depends what she's like and what her approach is like. It might be interesting. Okay, so finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. Why do I believe a God doesn't exist? I mean, not just that I disbelieve in a God. You see, if you disbelieve in a God, you lack belief in a God. In a way, you're kind of positively believing that there is no God. Would you think that's fair to say? I know that it's a strategic way of avoiding any kind of burden of proof. So if you say, "Oh, I just disbelieve in God. I don't accept that claim," it's you know, that's fine, because with a lot of Christians, they'll say, "Well, I can't prove my God, but you can't prove there isn't a God." So they misunderstand what the burden of proof is. That on the positive claim, you've got the burden of proof. Well, that's the thing. If you say there isn't a God, all right, in a way, it's a positive claim, but in another way, it isn't, in the sense that, well, in the sense that me saying there are no unicorns, nobody would say, "Oh, you're making a positive claim. Prove it." Yeah, prove that there are. I mean, nobody cares if I say, "Oh, that there are no unicorns." Unicorns don't exist. They're just made up inventions. Nobody really gets upset. Nobody's going to tell you to prove it. Nobody is going to say, "Oh, you made a positive claim. Prove it. Otherwise, retract it." Nobody's going to say that about unicorns. But about God, you say, "Oh, I'm convinced that no God exists," or "I can categorically state that no God exists." Well, that's not what I'm stating. Of course, I'm not stating that. But I have a very strong belief. I'm sorry, yeah, I have a very strong belief that there are actually no gods. Not only that, but that there is no supernatural realm, and that the universe and the material world is all there is. I've got a very strong belief that that is the case. And why? Because that's how reality seems to present itself. All we can detect, all we can see around us is the material world, the universe, and pretty much nothing else. Of course not. Um, we don't know that there is anything outside of the universe. There's no evidence that there is anything in any other dimension. And we've seen no evidence of any supernatural beings. We've seen no evidence, I mean, proper, real evidence of any gods. All we've seen are holy books and claims. And of course, we've seen philosophical arguments, which I've dismissed. And this is one reason why I can say I'm very confident that there are actually no gods. And I don't really feel that I need to go out there and prove it, simply because the absence of evidence is so, I mean, given the nature of the claim, the absence of evidence is so monumental. It's so monumental, given the nature of the claim, that there is this all-powerful, all-knowing being that is everywhere. The triomni God is everywhere, and yet we can't see it, we can't talk to it, we can't detect it. It doesn't reveal itself. I mean, if you exclude divine revelation, I don't include that as revealing itself. You would think that if there was such a monumentally powerful being, that it would manifest in some way that we could be confident that it exists. So that's one of my reasons for disbelieving: the absolute absence of evidence for an absolutely monumentally powerful being. It just doesn't add up. If there was something so monumentally powerful, there would be some evidence there that we could all see and interrogate and test. It would manifest itself some way in a way that wasn't ambiguous. I mean, when I say in a way that's not ambiguous, I mean in the way that a lot of Christians and theists claim that, oh, there was a coincidence that happened and there's nothing else that it could explain it except that there is a God. I mean, even I've been, what have I been doing? I've been a bit sarcastic recently. Um, I've been a bit sarcastically recently. Yeah, I mean, this thing about signs. I mean, people say, "Oh, that's a sign that there's a God." This is God manifesting Himself. And I've been a bit sarcastic with my partner, who is a Christian, and she's got a good sense of humor on the whole. So, when I make critical comments on religion, she tends to take it, she tends to have a bit of a laugh about it. And um, I mean, just recently I had a dream about something. I think in my dream there was a fox. No, no, sorry, that's not it. No, sorry, that's not it. That's another thing. Forget that. I'm getting mixed up. Yeah, she was she was telling me that, oh, um, do you think there are any foxes around here? In this county where we live, because she said she hasn't seen any. She made this comment to me a couple of weeks ago. She hadn't seen any foxes in this area. I said, "Oh, really? Oh," I said, "Yeah, I'm sure there are foxes around here. They're usually, they sort of live in the woods and they scavenge around. Sometimes they come into the cities to eat, or they'll come into a populated area to try and find some food. But they tend to be quite shy and keep themselves hidden. So that's probably why you've not seen any." And I said to her, "Have you actually seen any at all on your travels?" And she said, "No." Now, okay, she said this to me, and I thought nothing more of it. All right, we had a trip somewhere, we had a day out, and we came back late at night. Well, guess what happened? Guess what happened? On the way back, we saw two foxes. This is just a few days after I had this conversation with her. She's seen no foxes, in years and years and years. And in one night, we see two foxes. We see one scamper across the road. And then I saw another one. And I actually pulled in and shone my headlights on it just to show her, there's a fox. And then it ran off into the thicket, right? And I thought, and I said to her, "Oh," I said, "you've not seen several foxes. We were only talking about the other day. You've seen two foxes in one evening." And then I said, sort of jokingly, "Maybe there is a God after all." I mean, I only said that as a complete joke, because as a sort of satire on Christians who will see a coincidence and see something in that as being a manifestation of God's presence. Oh, and by the way, the following day we saw another fox. We saw three foxes in 2 days. And to be honest with you, I've not seen any foxes in a couple of years either. We had this conversation about foxes a few days previously, and then literally in 2 days we saw three foxes. Well, that was a bizarre coincidence, but it doesn't mean anything at all. It just doesn't mean anything. I mean, maybe because we've been talking about foxes, I was looking out for them or something like that. Who knows? Okay. But yeah, just coming back to this thing. So we need evidence which is not ambiguous for this monumentally powerful, um, ever all present God. It just doesn't add up. And it obviously relates to the other problem. And I suppose in a way is the same as the divine hiddenness problem. Why, if there's a God, why would the God remain hidden? Look, I used to keep fish. I had a tank about this size. I used to keep fish. I was the God of that aquarium. Okay. I didn't hide. I set up that world for those fish. I populated it. I sustained the fish. I sustained the aquarium by keeping it clean and by aerating it. I was the God, to all intents and purposes, of that aquarium. I didn't hide. From my, not creations, but from my children. We're supposed to be the children of God. I suppose in a way those fish were my children. I looked after them. I sustained them. I saw one fish bullying another, chasing it around. I intervened. I put my net in and I pulled out the bullying fish and I put it in another aquarium. I was doing all the things that, oh, not only that, I put things into the water to stop fish from getting ill. Okay, so I cared for that aquarium and the occupants of it, apparently more than God cares, if God exists, for human beings that populate God's planet. So this divine hiddenness thing doesn't really sort of add up. Now, I know there's this argument. There's this argument that, we've got free will, and if salvation is going to be meaningful, then we've got to live in a real world with real consequences. We don't live in a toy world. We live in a real world where bad things can happen if you do bad things. Yeah. I mean, theologically speaking, I can accept that argument. The only problem is that, you can't stop him. By that argument, you can't stop a murderer from killing somebody. If you were a god, you'd have to let that killing take place so that you could punish or offer salvation to the murderer. And then for the poor person that died, as a consolation, you could give them a good place in heaven. So I can see how that would fit in as part of the doctrine, and I could sort of accept it. The problem is there's a lot happening in the world which doesn't fit into that scheme. There are diseases. There are all sorts of things which happen which are not really connected with sin and the idea of salvation. And the only thing you could think of really would be that, for example, if you get a horrible disease, you suffer, you get stage 4 cancer and you die in agony, is that Christianity has seen suffering as a virtue. So they've created these sort of excuses for this divine hiddenness. One, that suffering is a virtue. B, we've got to live in a real world with real consequences because people have got free will. And those who transgress God's laws have got to have the chance of salvation. So obviously I don't accept that. So for me, divine hiddenness is a huge problem. Obviously the problem of suffering and evil is another one. So I don't really see why, if God's going to go to the trouble of fine-tuning the universe and then having this blue planet, this pale blue dot, where human beings can live and worship God, why it's necessary for these sort of chaotic, sort of random suffering to go on, indiscriminate suffering, a world in which I understand, if we go back prior to the 20th century, I believe I've seen a statistic somewhere that 50% of all people that ever existed died in childhood. And I would wonder why, if there's a benevolent, all good God, that should be the case, that the human race was engineered in such a way as to be so fragile that until we started inventing medicines, medical science, that 50% of the world's population died in childbirth. That doesn't really add up, does it? So, okay, there's another reason I believe that there are no gods. I think the other one would be that there are so many diverse religions. If one religion is true, all the others must be wrong. It means that if there's a God up there, knowing that the bulk of the world's population have settled on bogus religions and that only one religion is true, let's say it's Christianity, let's say that Christianity is true and the other religions are all false, it means that there's a God up there who has arranged things such that the word did not spread properly among the peoples of the world. I wouldn't think that if I was a God and I wanted, if I wanted my creation to sort of prosper and be happy and live fulfilling lives and to worship me and live by my laws, I would want to get my word out there in quite an efficient, universal way. I wouldn't have a chosen people who would spread the word in such an inefficient way. And I believe that the Jews kept their religion to themselves. They were not an evangelical tribe trying to convert. They didn't try to convert other tribes. They tried to destroy other tribes. They didn't try to convert them. They were happy, and they're still happy to keep the religion to themselves, whereas Christianity wants to spread. So everybody should have an equal opportunity. And this religion should have been made available to all the peoples of the world, even the little tribes in these tiny islands in Papua New Guinea and what have you, Indonesia. They should all have the opportunity at salvation, if that's the true religion, and that to have it localized in this in this Mediterranean world, Palestine, Israel, Jordan, etc., doesn't really seem to make much sense to me, particularly to bring that religion into the world when the bulk of the world's population is illiterate and there's a diverse number of languages. So even if it appears, it's going to be hundreds of years before eventually it's translated, and it can be spread around the world. In the meantime, billions of people are dying and not being saved. Okay, I mean that just doesn't seem to make much sense. I'm not really too sure what people like Rowan Williams would say about that, what his view would be on salvation, and for those who never really had the opportunity to listen to the word or to become Christians, whether they would get some kind of second chance or something like that. And the rest of us heathens who rejected God, we wouldn't get any chances at all. So there's another reason, the way that the religions have spread. I mean, it looks to me like obviously there are different world religions in different regions, and I mean, Christianity and Judaism were just two very local religions which happened to become very successful for various reasons. I mean, Christianity probably mainly because the Roman Empire adopted it. Judaism, or at least Jews, have managed to get around the world. They're very resilient. And Islam has gained followers by the strength of the sword. So it looks to me like a bit of a joke that if there's one true religion and the bulk of the world's population has chosen the wrong religion, I mean, it looks to me more likely that all the religions are false and that none of them are true, and that there is no true religion, that there's no supernatural world and there are no gods. Think about this. Imagine 2,000 years ago. Imagine that technology had gathered pace much faster than it did, and that in the Holy Land, when Jesus arrived, we already had the level of technology that we've got now. So yeah, we already had medical science, we already had factory farming, we could feed the populations. The civilizations were pretty much as they are now. Information, I mean, everything's there. People are better off than they really were. So there's not really much poverty. Imagine then if several thousand years ago, when, say, Judaism was getting going, or Christianity a bit later on, imagine if we already had a technologically advanced world then with full consumerism, whether anybody would have bothered inventing religions. Because nowadays, okay, look, I know that nowadays in the modern age, there are some people who are trying to invent religions, but by and large, people are not inventing religions anymore because we've got scientific knowledge about how the world came to be, about how the universe came to be, and about how we came into existence. So yeah, we've got medical science, we've got cosmology, etc. We've got all the knowledge, the theory of evolution. We've got Big Bang cosmology, and we're starting to get and learn more about how we came to be. And so consequently, religion is less needed. It was more needed then because people thought, where the hell did all this come from? What's up there? I mean, they didn't know. They didn't know how vast space is. Yeah, where did we all come from? They thought, I mean, some of the clever ones must have thought, if we keep going back and back and back, um, where did everything comes from? Of course, it's a natural question. It's a question that a lot of people would have been asking in those times. And they would have been scratching their heads. And some of them would have been saying, well, just like we've got a king, maybe there's a king of all this. Maybe there's a king somewhere in some realm somewhere that, we can't see this king, but maybe there is this king. And maybe this king has favored us, is watching us, and we should, if we pray to this king and we're good to this king and make sacrifices to it, maybe it will help us defeat our enemies, etc. So yeah, I mean, going back to those times when people knew hardly anything, I can see absolutely how religions got started off and how they evolved. What is unbelievable, though, is how we're now stuck with them today. In the modern age, we've got so much information. We've got science that explains so much, if not everything. And yet we've still got these religions. But no, I don't see any big new religions being born because, there's no real need for any new religions. And I just think that if we had everything, all the knowledge and technology back then, all the religions we've now got would have been born. We might have still had Islam. We might have still had Islam because I suppose the Arabs needed a religion to sort of unite them all. And so somebody was always going to invent Islam. But as for Christianity, I don't know. So none of it really makes sense. It's like Matt has often said, they can't all be right, but they could be, and they probably are all wrong. That's what I think is the case. Let me just see what you're commenting, whether you've got any reasons for believing there are no gods. Hello, Mike Wagner. Good to see you here. Okay, Daniel says, I recall the time I thought there was no God. It was a very dark time for me during that period. Well, I think there's no God, Daniel, and it's not a dark time for me. And I'm sorry it was a dark time for you. Okay, yeah, multi-purpose weirdo is responding to that. Jacqueline Hume says, why isn't the discovery of all the human species and fossils alone debunked a God? Well, I was watching today, Richard Dawkins was in discussion with Rowan Williams on the theory of evolution. And his view was that effectively God had used that the theory of evolution did not contradict the existence of a creator God, and that this process of natural selection could be just seen as God's creative method. Because look, I mean, God either brought everything into existence out of nothing like a magician, or God somehow synthesized the universe out of something and used some kind of process to do it. Like an alchemist would do, like an alchemist turned base metals into gold. Then let's say that God did the same. He used something to create everything. So no, I mean, the theory of evolution doesn't debunk the existence of a God. Yeah. Okay. All right. Good to see you chatting there. Let me see. Why else do I think there's no? Why else do I think there's no God? I think because of the way. Look, there's been a recent discovery. I'm not sure how well it's been confirmed, but the idea is that life, we think, started 600 million years ago on Earth, and they've now made a discovery that it may be much earlier, and that there may have been. Oh, excuse me, it is very late here. I'll be going to bed soon. Um, the life may have got started 1500 million years ago and not evolved beyond a basic slime, which subsequently died out. And then there was no life for several hundred million years. And then eventually there was an abiogenesis event, or several, and life started up again 600 million years ago. Now, if there's a God, that's using evolution as a method, as a creative method for life, why would God start a, why would God start an abiogenesis event which he knew could only possibly lead to this slime, which would rule the planet for 100 million years? There'd be nothing but slime that wouldn't evolve anywhere at all, or just would not evolve really much. It would not really get natural selection going to create really diverse species for whatever reasons. The conditions that were on the Earth, maybe, I don't know. So for 100 million years, it was just this slime, and then there was absolutely nothing for 500 million years. Now, I know people are going to say, to God, a billion years is like the blink of an eye. It's nothing at all. I know, I get that, but still, it does seem a bit strange that it should be such a long, drawn-out process for a creator, all-powerful God, that the Earth has got to sit around for 100 million years with nothing but slime. And then when life does get going, we've then got 200 million years when these huge creatures, dinosaurs, rule the planet. And all the time, God is waiting to create his masterpiece, Homo sapiens. And that's going to have to wait another 300 million years or something. And I mean, none of that really makes any sense. It's consistent with a universe in which there is no God. I mean, that kind of scheme that I've just described is consistent with no God. So, yeah. Mike Wagner says maybe the slime could be described as void and without form. Well, you could interpret it. You could interpret it like that, but I mean, even slime has a form. Even slime is life, isn't it? It's something. It's life because, yeah. I mean, it's still life. Life has still started. So, and if there was life on Earth at that time, 1500 million years ago, then obviously, I don't think you could say it was void and without form. Okay. All right, now then, guys, 2 minutes and I'm out of here. I've given some reasons. I don't know. I'm sure that there are other reasons. I've got this big book on atheism, and but it mainly deals with philosophical arguments against the existence of God, which I've not gone into that because it's beyond the scope, and I don't know the arguments well enough to really talk about them. So I've just really talked about some of the more common arguments. And I think, just, I mean, one more thing just about Christianity is that salvation to me just sort of, inventing a set of rules by which we've got these sins and then salvation, to me kind of makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But I mean, that's like the Christian God. But I admit that just because it makes no sense to me whatsoever doesn't mean that it's not true. So, yeah. Okay, so I think that's about it. Well, look, I'd like to thank you very much for being with me for the last 1 hour and 40 minutes. So I'm going to go to bed now. And thank you very much for being with me. I'll be back next week. I'm not too sure which day I'm going to be back. I like to do these on Monday, but I didn't feel like doing one on Monday, and I had stuff happening, and I wasn't even going to do one tonight. But I thought, oh, what the hell? So thank you very much for watching, and thanks for taking part in chat, and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now. Good night.